Okay, so real talk, what is perspective? So if you are watching this, that means that you are on your second video for these notes. Congratulations. Like I said, I'm going to make sure the notes do not necessarily overpower everything, but these notes will go through slides 5 through 7. So it'll focus on, well, this one obviously 4. So it'll focus on mostly about 3 slides at a time, and it'll allow me to break things down for you in a way that makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so let's look at perspective. Perspective is the particular attitude or the way of thinking about something, and think about it like a worldview. So it's not only how I see the world, it's also how I perceive it. Okay? Because you guys know that sometimes people do not necessarily see things the same way as you do, even if you come from the same place, even if you are friends. Sometimes there's other things that skew the way we see the world. So perspective takes that whole concept into consideration. All right, so it takes your background, it takes your history, it takes everything about you, and it sums it up to think about how you think about the world. A good example of this is that you could be having a conversation with someone and you could think that you're speaking perfectly normal, like you're having a great conversation with this person, things are going great, everything's good, but that person perceives you as aggressive, or maybe they think that you're being sarcastic and they just don't understand how you're speaking to them. That is a good time to think about, well, what is that person's perspective of me and of the way that I speak? And then you can think about, well, what's my perspective on it? And then when you break it down and start thinking about those little inconsistencies, that's where you start seeing perspective, which is really a cool thing in actual life. So it's kind of a psychological thing. So it's really fun if you want to start breaking down. So what does perspective do? Okay, what does it actually do in a story? In real life, it changes the way you perceive the world around you. So, embarrassing story, but I sometimes am very dramatic. And so I have to, and I know this about myself, I am a dramatic person, and sometimes the way I perceive things, my perspective on things, is slightly unreliable. So I'll go and tell my husband the story, and he can tell me whether or not my perception or my perspective is skewed. So what does it do in a story though? Right? Well, think about it this way. In a story, everything has been chosen for a reason. So the perspective has been chosen for a reason. So it's either the author wants you to find the story funny, the author wants you to find the story suspenseful, the author doesn't want you to know everything that's happening in the story. It's kind of like a movie, guys. The director of a movie and the writers and the director of a movie leave some things open to interpretation by the viewers. And that's what the author's doing. He chooses the perspective for a reason, whatever the reason might be. So that's how, actually, that kind of goes into perspective plays into purpose, which, we'll talk about later. So in this particular case, perspective influences plot. So how you see this, how the author wants you to see the story and how you see the story influences like what you think the climax is or what you think the resolution of the story is. So this is where literature gets to be fun and you get to have your own interpretation of things within reason. And at the same time, the character's perspective might influence the plot because it changes the way the character looks at the way things are happening in the story. And then, of course, if the character sees things a certain way, it might change how the conflict's resolved. So that's how it influences plot. It also influences the amount of information that is revealed to the audience. So like I told you with a movie, the directors and the writers make the decisions to only show the audience what they want the audience to know. And the author has that same power in a story. And so a lot of the times, how the information is revealed to us, this is where point of view, first, second, third, omniscient, objective, that's where this comes into play. And we'll talk about that in our next video. So how much information we receive. And that, of course, also comes into play when you think about suspense and humor. What does the author not want us to know? What does he want us to worry about? Versus what does he not want us to know and then think it's funny? Okay? And then overall, perspective is achieved through the use of all the points of view. So the perspective is really achieved when you look at all the characters together, the author and you, and then you can see what was the actual purpose, outcome of the story. Like, what was it really supposed to do?